Hello, today we're going to talk about how we light fires and the safety involved in lighting fires in forest schools. The first thing that you always look for is, again, you revert to your risk assessment and you make sure that you've got all the safety gear that you need for lighting a fire. And today that safety gear is going to consist of, and if you may see it behind me, we have a fire blanket, a first aid kit and 10 litres of water and some fire resistant gloves. Now I've got two volunteers for this video and we're going to teach them today how to light a fire. So other things we're going to have to talk about, guys, is adequate clothing for when we light a fire. So what do we not want to do when we're lighting fires as with concerning our clothing?
We wouldn't want to wear like too flammable clothes.
That's right.
That can easily catch fire.
Exactly. So we want to do away with loose flowing clothes, don't we? And nylons and things like that. So we're far better off with what we got on today, which is fantastic. And for the girls as well, I would ask the girls to pin their hair back. And guys, like, see, you've got your jumpers tied around your waist. So if I could ask you to remove your jumpers so that there's no loose dangly clothes, you can put them on a pile on that on there if you like. Very good. Right, which brings me to my next part, which is fire safety. So when we're in a forest school, guys, and we're in our forest circle now, our fire circle, what don't we do?
We don't walk inside the circle.
That's right. So you always walk on the outside of the circle, and you only come into the circle when an adult has invited you in, okay? And that keeps everybody safe then. Other things that we need to talk about when we're lighting fires is where we're lighting them. I mean, we're quite fortunate in this forest school area because we've got a fire pit and we've got good ground in order to light a fire. So what would we not be looking for, guys, if we were lighting a fire in the woods, do you think?
Not like dry grass around.
Yeah, no dry grass.
No dry branches.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the main things that we're looking for, because we don't want any fires to spread. We heard a lot on the news recently about bushfires, and you don't want to be causing one, do we? You know, so we always look at where we're going to put our fires whenever we're in the woods, okay? And not just grass and stuff as well. There's another one to think about, and that is in fern woods or coniferous woods. We're lucky here, we've got a nice broadleaf woodland, but coniferous trees, the sap of coniferous trees is quite flammable, and that sap, of course, isn't always just in the trees themselves, but they're in their roots as well. So we have to look at the soil that we're lighting our fires on and make sure that our soil is not got a lot of peat in it or a lot of things that can stay lit, because you will find, and it has been heard of, that fires can actually stay lit underground for weeks at a time. So you've got to be very careful when you're lighting fires on the ground what sort of soil is you're lighting your fire on, okay? I would always advocate the use of a fire pit because it keeps the fire off the ground and you haven't got to worry about anything igniting then and staying lit underground. Okay, so the next thing we got to look at is the purpose of our fire. So why are we lighting a fire? What are the reasons do you think are for us to light the fire?
Well, for warmth.
For warmth, that's a very good one, yeah. Well,
Light.
for light, yeah. Anything else?
Also, if you were you could cook stuff on it.
Cooking, yes. Cooking, that's very important, isn't it? Because we've got to eat. And not just that, we can use fires as well to ensure that the water that we're drinking is clean, because we can boil the water on the fire and then we'll know then that all the bugs and all the bacteria are all dead and the water is safe to drink afterwards. So there's a lot of purposes to lighting a fire. So we've talked a little bit about the soil and the positioning of our fire. So we want to make sure that there's no grass or anything that can spread, and we want to position our fire so it's in a safe place. Now, what do you think we ought to find out as well if we're lighting a fire? Think of this fire in particular, guys. So if something went wrong, where would we go?
We would go outside of the fire.
That's right. So what we do is we've got 2 routes into our forest school, haven't we? So if anything was to go wrong, and I would ask people to go to the assembly point, we've got an assembly point outside Key Stage 2 there. So I would ask everybody to go to the assembly point using either that route there or this route here, exiting the forest area and going back towards the school, okay? So that's what we'll do in case of an emergency. Alright? So another thing we have to talk about as well is permissions to light a fire. So we're lucky in school because we have permission to light a fire in school, but we would need to search permission if we were to light fires elsewhere. As I explained about the soil, you know, you'll get some farms, and especially up in our mountains here, there's a lot of peat in the ground, and peat can be used as a fire ignition, so peat can stay burning for a long time. Right? So we always make sure that we know our soil and we have permission from the landowner to have a fire on that particular site. Okay, so always make sure that we've got permission to have a fire. You shouldn't be lighting fires anywhere where we haven't got permission to do so. Alright, and now what else do you think we have to look at when we're lighting fire, guys?
To look out of where we light fire on the fire pit.
Yeah, we do.
Like,
One of the main things I think that we've got to watch as well is the weather conditions. How do you think weather can affect fires?
if it's like really sunny, then it might. If it was damp, it wouldn't really light that well.
Exactly. So we'd have a lot of trouble lighting a fire if it was piddling down with rain, wouldn't we? It would be difficult because everything would get wet and there would be a lot of moisture around, and it's very difficult to light a fire. What else do you think we have to be very careful of? And think about the bushfires that we was talking about earlier.
You have to be very careful to not let it spread. Like if it's
Yeah.
Try not to do it in like really dry weather.
Um, Well, dry weather's okay. There's something with dry weather that causes all the problems. So I'll tell you what it is, and it's wind. Because what often happens is you can have a fire here, we can have it in the right position, we can have it on the right soil, we can be away from all the dry grass and peat and tap roots and roots that go underneath that could light fire. But one of the things that we can't anticipate is a hot ember gets floated up in the air and then the wind takes it away, and then that hot ember might land then somewhere where it can catch fire. So dry, windy conditions are not really ideal for lighting fires because fires can spread very easily, and we don't want to do that. So we always make sure that our conditions are safe by looking at the weather and seeing what the weather's doing. And if it's really, really hot and really, really windy, that's not really suitable conditions to light a fire, okay? So we got to make sure that we know that as well. So as with every forest school session, and we talked about earlier, we don't allow you inside the circle when we're lighting fires. So you all know that the circle, you only come in the circle if you're invited. And now we're going to look at what we need to light the fire next, okay? So there's something called the fire triangle. And the triangle consists of, if I had a few branches, but I haven't. So the triangle consists of 3 elements that we need to make a fire. Do you know what any of those elements would be?
Oxygen.
Oxygen, yes. So every fire needs oxygen because fires are like us, they need to breathe. Anything else you can think?
A fuel source.
Fuel source, yes, that's another one. So that's one form of the triangle. There's another. There's one section of the triangle left, and what do you think that is?
Kindle.
Not quite. Think you've got the oxygen, you've got the fuel. What do you need next?
Something to light it with.
Ignition. Absolutely. So if you've got the triangle there like that, you've got ignition, you've got fuel, and you've got oxygen. And those form the fire triangle. Without any of those elements, if you was to take one of those elements away, so if you was to take oxygen away, your fire would go out. If you put oxygen back but then took fuel away, your fire would go out. If you was to put fuel back and you was to take the ignition away, then you wouldn't have a fire. Okay, so without any of those things, your fire wouldn't work. Alright? Now we've got ignition here, and we're going to use these for the demonstration today. And these are fire sticks. Have you seen these before, boys?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you approach your fire, I want you to be in a kneel position, like so. So one knee down like that. I'll show you in a minute. You haven't got to do it now. But always make sure you got one knee up and one knee down. And then you're lighting the fire by drawing your ignition away from you, okay? And the reason I want you on one knee like this is because if anything was to go wrong, then you can move away fast. Okay? If you were on two knees and you were doing it, then you've got to get up on one knee, then you've got to get up on the other and go. So it's much faster to get away if you've got one knee up in the air already. Alright, so it's always good. Most of my forest school activities, you'll always be in this sort of position. Alright, so it just means that you can move away from whatever you're doing quite quickly, should anything go wrong. Okay, so we've got our ignition, and for today's demonstration, we're going to be using cotton wool. So there's our fire triangle again, guys. Let me just put it. Here's our fire triangle, and this is our ignition. And then we've got our fuel, and then this one then would represent oxygen. Alright, so once we've lit our initial fuel, that's going to burn out quite quickly. Alright, so what else do you think we're going to need to keep our fire sustained?
Dry wood.
More fuel. Alright, so what we're going to do is I'm going to send you away in a minute to pick up some very, very thin matchstick sized sticks. Alright, so we'll form a few, we'll get a nice little pile each of matchstick sized sticks, and then after that then we're going to build up into twigs. Alright, we won't go any bigger than that because we don't need a fire for very long. We're only lighting a fire really for this demonstration, okay? But if you were to want a fire for cooking or for anything else, then you'd need to sustain it with more fuel. So if you start your fire, and you always start small and work your way up, what you'll get then is a decent fire. And I tend to use the raft method. So I'll get some thick sticks and I'll make a little raft like this. Little raft of sticks. I haven't got many here today, but just to give you a basis of what we're looking at. So make a little raft like that. I'll put my ignition on my raft, then I would put my very thin sticks on the top of that, then the thicker ones, then the thicker ones, then the branches, then the logs, and then by the time I finish building up to log sizes like that, I know my fire is going to last at least an hour. Alright, so again, if you want it for any length of time, the bigger your logs, the better it'll be. But if you don't start small, then there won't be sufficient heat for those logs to catch fire. Alright, so you always start off with the ignition and then build yourself up then from matchstick size twigs to bigger logs and branches, okay? So work your way up, and that'll sustain your fire then, and it'll keep lighting, it'll keep lit, and it'll be able to cook on or do whatever you need to do on it. Ooh, careful Wormy, I don't want to roast you. Come here. Ooh, Jaden. Come here Wormy. Right, so I'm going to send you off now, guys, and I want you to get, like that little twig that you had there, if you get something like that size, alright?
Look. Snap it up.
Yeah, exactly. So you only want it really the size of the palm of your hand. So put it along the palm of your hand like that, snap it again, snap it again, and then that's going to form the next level of your fuel, okay? So if I send you away now, boys, go and have a look for some of those. And I'll pause the video a second. Ooh. Okay, so the boys have now collected some kindling for the fire, and what we're going to do now is I'm going to demonstrate how to light our cotton buds. Now guys, I said earlier on in the video, the reason I put this little raft here, can anyone, well, do you know why I put that little raft there? Do you know why that's so useful, guys?
Because then it has is that for a base?
It is a kind of base. So what you've got when you've got a little raft like this is it allows air to get underneath the fire, and the fire can draw oxygen from underneath, and it also means that you know you've got a dry surface. Because if you were in the woods, very often than not, the ground that you may be lighting your fire on can be damp, and as soon as you put cotton down on that damp, that cotton will absorb that water and that moisture, and sometimes they can even absorb it from the air, and you won't be able to get it to light because it'll be damp. Alright, so if you've got a little raft like that, then ignition will be far easier for you. Alright, so what I'm going to get you to do next now, boys, is I'm going to get you to light your fire. So I want you to stand on one knee like so. Not just yet, I'll just show you a minute, alright, and then you can come and have a go. And then I want you to get your fire stick, put the stick itself in your less dominant hand. So if you're right-handed like me, I'll have my striker in my right hand and my fire stick in my left hand, okay? Now the gloves I'm going to leave out because the gloves are very important. So once you've ignited that, right, you need to put the gloves on in order to feed the fire. So when you want to add any wood or tend to the fire, and not just tending to it, for cooking purposes as well, always put the fire resistant gloves on, alright? So first thing I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to get you to go on one knee like so. I'm going to get you to hold your fire stick in place like that and strike and light the fire. I was quite lucky there, that lit in one go. I'm not going to add anything to this fire now, guys, because I want this to burn out quite quickly, because I want you to have a go yourselves, alright? So we're going to stay here now. In fact, I think I might even just put it out. So I'll put my gloves on. Like so. I'll get my lid of my tin. I'm going to place my tin lid over the top. What does that do, guys?
Locks the oxygen.
That's right. So it takes away one of those triangles, doesn't it? One of those triangles. So it's now got no oxygen. It can't breathe anymore. So when I take this off, it should have gone out, and it has. Now, as soon as I've taken that lid off, you can still see there's red embers burning in there. Now those embers could reignite. Alright, the only thing they would need is a little bit more oxygen, which is why it's so important to check your weather before you start lighting a fire. Can you imagine if one of those hot embers rose like that, blew 100 yards, possibly even longer, even further sometimes, and then landed in a straw field? It would just light the whole field up. So the whole field would be on fire, and it would be your fault. Okay, so I'm going to finish putting this out now. Okay. I'm going to remove the cotton. Like so. So when I get you to ignite your fires now, guys, I want you to split up the items that you've collected into two different parts. Then I want you to light the cotton, okay? And then once the cotton's lit, I want you to put the gloves on, and I want you to start building the fire, okay? So what you're doing is you're tending your fire then, alright? So you're giving it one of the triangles, you're giving it fuel, and it's already got oxygen, and you've already given it ignition. So what you're going to be looking to do is feed the fire. Alright, so I'm going to put my gloves down by here for you. Everything is in place. And what do I do with that fire stick, guys? Yeah. Something here for you. Two pieces of cotton each. Who wants to go first? Okay, there you go. You come into the fire circle now. Yes! We got it. And good that you moved away. That's right. Put your gloves on now. So, we've learned that we need perseverance. Is the key, I think, boys, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we need to persevere, change our techniques a little bit, and find out what suits us best when we come in to use the fire sticks. Did you enjoy that, guys?
Yeah.
Did you learn anything, guys?
Yeah.
Happy days. That's what we're after. Okay, so now I'm going to demonstrate how to build, light and build this fire, and then we're going to demonstrate the safe way of putting the fire out. So we've got the boys are here with a bucket full of water. So I'm going to start this fire off, we'll get it established, and then one of the boys then is going to extinguish the fire safely. Right, if the smoke's in your face, guys, what would you do?
Move.
Exactly. So make sure you stay out of the fire circle and move away from the smoke.
Or shuffle. The bucket. The bucket.
Okay, so who's going to demonstrate extinguishing fire? Okay. So never leave a fire lit. So bring the bucket over slowly. That's right. Now pour the water into the fire pit. Keep going. There you go. Now you put it over the top now. Go for it. Go wild. And there you go. Safely extinguish the fire. And that's the second part of the video done. Hello again. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about managing campfires. I've got a bit of a list here that I'm going to work through, and top of my list is the purpose. So what is the purpose of me having a campfire? Okay, so I think the main purpose for forest schools is engagement. I mean, there's not a kid in the world that doesn't enjoy lighting a fire and activities that involve a fire. And it's also very good for your mental health. It's good to keep you warm, it's good to cook your food over, it's good to purify water. Yeah, it's so many uses, but obviously you want a fire that fits the purpose that you were mainly looking for. So running forest schools, my purpose for a campfire would be more to do with engagement, so participant engagement, mental well-being, teamwork. There's so much that my participants get out of making fires. It builds on their confidence, a range of things. So I don't need a huge fire, and we obviously have a very strict safety regime that we follow. And before I do any activities down in the forest school regarding fire, I always talk to them about the fire risks and fire rules for forest school. And before I practice any activities that involve lighting a fire down in the forest area, I make sure that all my participants are independently practicing those fire rules without fire being present. So it becomes second nature to them. They'll always walk around the fire circle instead of through the fire circle. They won't enter the fire circle unless they're invited to. And we'll have all our discussions and debates and story times, poems and sing songs around the fire circle. So I don't need a fire there in order to instill these rules about fire safety. Other equipment that we're going to need for fire safety would be fire resistant gloves, at least 10 litres of water, a first aid kit, a set of walkie-talkies so that I can call for help if I need to, a mobile phone so I can call for an ambulance if I need one. I also instill the assembly points to the children and show them the quickest escape routes out of the forest should they ever need to. So there's a lot of rules involved. So what I'll tend to do is I'll bring these up long before I introduce an activity that involves fires, and that gives it a chance then for them to for it to become second nature to participants before you start having activities that involve fire. So positioning of the fire is important as well. At present, I'm not overly happy with the position of my fire circle in the forest area at the moment. It's too in the middle for my liking. I'd rather it to the side, and the reason I want it moved to the side is because I don't want it being used as a shortcut to get from A to B, and that's what I find happen. happens quite a lot. So we will be looking to move my fire circle at the moment from where it is for that purpose. So think about the position of it. Think about it in the position of it regarding your escape routes, and of course you've got to look at the conditions where you're going to move your fire circle to, or the position of your fire, the soil, what weather conditions you're going to hit there. So I would choose an area that's not exposed to wind, so a little bit of a sheltered area, somewhere where I haven't got to worry about embers blowing anyway. And again, if you were camping somewhere outside of my forest school area, you would need, not only would you need those safety equipments and those safety rules in place, you would also need to look at the different types of woodland that you're going to be lighting your fires in. Personally, I would not light a fire in a coniferous woodland, because pine needles and pine trees full of sap that is highly flammable, and so are the roots. So you've got a root source there for fire, and then you've got the canopy source as well. Coniferous woodlands would be a bit of a no-no for me for campfires. Other type of woodlands, some broadleaf woodlands are also a bit of a no-no. That's because they'll have a lot of ground layer vegetation that is dry and dead from maybe a year back. So you could have a lot of places there. You could do one there, but you would need to clear that area first. So you would clear it of all the debris until you were down on dirt. Then I would still use a fire pit, but if you didn't choose to use a fire pit, then you've got to think about the things that you're going to use to surround that fire with. I always favour just big wet rotten logs, quite big ones. They don't tend to burn very fast then, because there's no fat left in them. They're rotten and they're quite big, so it would take hours for them to burn through. And so I would make a log triangle, if you like, and then I would have my fire in the centre of that, and that would help contain my fire and stop my fire from spreading on ground level. But then you have to think about peat as well. It could be a very peaty soil, and peat can stay lit underground for weeks. So that's another element that you need to look for when you're looking at soil types and woodland types. And the other thing you need to remember as well is you need permission from the landowner before you can light any fires. He may be aware of something that you're not, and not just that, it would be very rude to light a fire without asking permission from the landowner first. So even if all conditions are right, if the landowner says no, then it's a no. And so you have to remember that as well. Again, just make sure wherever you are lighting your fires then that you have a clear escape route. So make sure that there's ample places for you to escape from the position of your fire. Managing the surrounding areas and seating is another important part of where you're going to put your fire pit or your fire. I like my fire circle to be at least 5 meters in circumference. That would allow then 2.5 meters between someone who's seated and the fire. The reason I like that is because I just feel it's safer. They don't get quite so much of an effect from smoke inhalation, and if something was a little bit damp and it popped on the fire, it's very rare that you would get an amber that popped and it shot off further than 2.5 meters away from the source. So think about the distances and the type of seating that you're going to have as well. Also, I like it 2.5 meters away, is because that allows enough gap then that if someone was to trip over and fall, one of my participants were to trip over and fall, they couldn't fall on top of the fire. 2.5 meters is just a little bit bigger than the length of a door, so that gives enough space for a trip or a fall, so that your participants can trip and then land inside your fire. So you've got to think about the distance from the fire to the seating area. Obviously as well, you want to minimize your ecological impact on woodlands, so I always tend to follow the rule of leave no trace. So I would, if we did have a campfire and we stayed somewhere overnight, I would leave it as I found it. Everything would get packed away. my fire pit would be disposed of safely and extinguished thoroughly, and all the seating area would be put away and all the debris would be dragged back over to the fire area. So it just basically looked like we hadn't been there. No litter, no rubbish, nothing. Leave it as we find it is my motto. So fire pits and surrounds, we've covered that now really. Fire lays for different purposes. Now I always favour a raft type, so I'll build a raft out of kindling, and then I would put my ignition source on top of that, and then I would put my kindling then on top of my ignition source. The reason I like to do this is because if something is a little bit damp, and our fire pit often can be, because it gets left outside and there's some rain, it could be wet, it could be a puddle at the bottom of it, so I tip the water out, but that would still leave the fire pit wet. So I always make a raft on top of the fire pit out of kindling, and then ignite the source on top of that then. And so that's my favourite part. There's numerous different ways to light the fire. That's just the one I find that works the best for me. So that's the one I use. I'm also very careful about using non-toxic types of wood. Now, as a rule, I don't use anything unless it's natural. So I wouldn't be burning anything that had been tannalized or treated. It is very tempting to use that if you've got some extra cut-offs or some waste wood, but it could create toxins in the smoke. So I only use natural materials when I'm lighting my fires, and they are sourced from the surrounding area. Well, we're very lucky in our forest school area that there's ample materials there for fire lighting, so I don't have to worry about us ever running out. There's loads there. We've got a large woodland to the side of our forest school area, and if we ever need any, we can just go in there and get some more, and we pick it up off the floor. Got a lot of trees up in that other area that's suffering from ash dieback, so there's plenty of material on the floor for us to burn. And if I did ever need to source any material, I would make sure that it was untreated and kiln dried, so I know it was safe to use and there'd be no toxins in that type of wood. Other things that I'm going to go through with you as well are weather conditions. I don't personally like windy, dry conditions. The reason is because that is the main cause of bushfires. You can have a great area to light your fire in, and it could be fantastically safe, but if an ember gets blown up in the air and then lands in a field of wheat, that field of wheat could be going, and nothing's worth that. So I wouldn't plan on any fire activities in my forest schools if the conditions were dry and had been dry for some time and there was a wind in the air. I always tend to use my flint and steel for fire lighting with my participants. This is because it's still not an easy thing to do. I'm quite confident at it myself now, but some of my participants really do struggle, as you'll see from my video. I had to cut a large section of that out because it took a good 20 minutes for the young lad to ignite the cotton, but I still favour it that way, and it teaches them a bit of resilience. It teaches them that perseverance is key, and it teaches them to use different techniques if something's not working. So I always say to them, look, stop, think about what you're doing, think how you could improve on the method you're using, and they always change, and if it works better they'll keep on, and then they'll find some way of tweaking it, and I think that's good for them. So I try not, although I did a little bit in the video for the sake of trying to keep the time scale down, I try not to interfere too much when they're lighting a fire, and they get more joy out of it then when they're successful. So when they finally do succeed in lighting their fire, they get a lot more out of it. So I also, as you'll see in my video, explain about the fire triangle and the necessities of it, and the way you can use the fire triangle to extinguish fires. So I'm not sure if you want me to but basically a fire triangle is it consists of 3 sides, and those sides are oxygen, ignition and fuel, and if you take any one of those 3 away, then your fire won't light. And that's something I emphasize on them, because it's important to teach them how their fires survive, because a fire is alive, and you know, if you don't want your fire to die, then you need to keep it alive. And so using a fire triangle not only helps you explain how to sustain a fire, but it also helps you explain how to extinguish one safely. So I find that quite important. Size and type of fire, I only ever have small fires really. Even if I'm cooking, I can sustain a small fire in a fire pit, and that is sufficient for anything that I would need. I don't need bonfire size fires, or small fires, very small fires are quite useful though. So when I am teaching my participants how to light a fire, a small fire can be quite useful, because you can just use an ignition source and one source of fuel, like a cotton bud for example, so they can practice and they can light a cotton bud, and that'll go out quite quickly. So small size to about fire pit size is my maximum for a fire size. And as I explained, with management of resources, we are very lucky on that respect, that we've got such a beautiful area and we're not short of any resources to light fires. I hope that covered everything. Thanks very much. Bye bye.